The town of Vilendorf was small enough that the church bell could be heard from every street. Before the war, that sound meant morning, market, or mass. After the war, it meant nothing at all. At the corner of the main square stood a tiny shop with faded blue shutters, H. Keller and Son, clockmakers. But there was no son anymore. Only Hermann Keller, an old man with thin silver hair and hands that still trembled from the shelling he'd survived 20 years ago. Every morning, Hermann unlocked his shop, wound the clocks, and waited. The same rhythm every day, the same smell of dust and brass oil, the same sound of ticking that filled the silence like an old song. Few people came to buy clocks anymore. The world had learned to tell time from the sun, from the radio, from the trains that no longer ran on schedule. But Hermann still believed that time could be repaired, like a gear that only needed the right touch. He had been a clockmaker all his life. When the war began, he was 43, too old for the front but too proud to do nothing. So he joined the repair corps, fixing broken watches for soldiers who thought that a working watch could keep them safe, as if seconds could shield them from bullets. He never fired a weapon. His battlefields were tables covered in glass and brass dust. But the noise, the constant rumbling thunder of distant shells, it shook even the smallest gears. Once, he repaired a captain's pocket watch that had stopped at 3:17 a.m., the exact moment its owner's unit had been hit by artillery. The captain had stared at it for a long time, then closed the lid and said, "Let it stay there." That's the time I stopped believing in mornings. Hermann had never forgotten that. After the war ended, he returned to Vilendorf. His shop was still standing, though the roof had holes and the glass was gone. His wife, Marta, had died during an evacuation, and his son, Lucas, was listed among the missing. Hermann fixed the roof, replaced the windows, and reopened the shop, but not the part of himself that still waited for Lucas to walk through the door. Every clock in the shop ticked differently, like each was remembering its own moment of silence. Sometimes he thought he could hear voices between the ticks, laughter, footsteps, a boy's voice calling, "Papa." But it was only the wind sneaking through the shutters. He had long stopped checking the mailbox. Letters had ceased years ago. One rainy afternoon, a young soldier entered the shop. He looked no older than 20, his uniform still creased as if fresh from the depot. He placed a broken wristwatch on the counter and said quietly, "It belonged to my father. He fought near here." Hermann took it in his hands. The glass was cracked, but he recognized the make, military issue, same model he'd repaired during the war. When he opened the back, he froze. Scratched inside the casing were the initials L.K. He looked up slowly. "What was your father's name?" "Lucas Keller," the boy said. The old man's breath caught. The shop seemed to stop ticking. For a moment, all the clocks were silent. Then, faintly, they began again, one after another, as if waking from a dream. "Where did you find this?" Hermann whispered. The boy hesitated. "In an abandoned trench. My mother told me my father never came back. I wanted to find something of his." Hermann could not speak. He only nodded and said, "I'll fix it." For days, he worked on the watch. His hands trembled, but his eyes were sharp. He polished the glass, replaced the spring, and cleaned every gear until it shone like gold. Each night, he thought about Lucas, not the soldier, but the boy who had once sat beside him, watching him work, asking why time never stopped even when people did. When the watch finally ticked again, Hermann smiled for the first time in years. He wrapped it carefully in a cloth and waited for the young soldier to return. But the next morning, the boy did not come. Nor the next. Days passed. Weeks. The war was over again, they said. Armistice, peace, reconstruction, the same words, the same empty promises. Hermann waited anyway. Winter came. The snow muted the town like a soft blanket over its wounds. The clockmaker's shop stayed warm only from the ticking of its many hearts, pendulums swinging like breathing lungs, small seconds marching onward in invisible unison. One night, Hermann dreamt of a field filled with broken clocks instead of graves. The wind moved their hands, turning them backward, then forward, erasing time itself. In the dream, he saw Lucas standing there, holding the same pocket watch, smiling. "You fixed it, Papa," the dream Lucas said. "You fixed time." When Hermann awoke, he was crying. But they were not sad tears. They were tired ones. A month later, the young soldier finally returned. His arm was in a sling, his face looked older. "I'm sorry," he said. I had to leave. They sent us north again. Hermann didn't scold him. He simply placed the repaired watch on the counter. It runs now, he said softly. But be careful. It keeps more than time. The boy smiled faintly, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small metal tag. They found this near the old river bridge, he said. It has your name. I think my father wanted you to have it. It was Lucas's identification tag, rusted, worn, but unmistakable. Hermann closed his hand around it and whispered something the soldier couldn't hear. When the boy left, the doorbell jingled one last time. That evening, Hermann walked to the town square. The church clock had stopped at 3:17, the same time as the captain's watch long ago. He climbed the stairs, wound the old mechanism, and restarted it. The bell rang once, echoing through Vilendorf like a heartbeat. Then he returned to his shop, locked the door, and sat among the ticking clocks. He placed Lucas's tag beside the repaired watch and leaned back in his chair. The snow outside fell softly, covering the streets, the ruins, and the scars. Inside, all the clocks ticked together, perfectly synchronized for the first time in decades. Hermann smiled faintly. It's fixed, he whispered. And for the first time since the war, time itself seemed to rest. The end.